Hi everybody, Keith Tanner here from Flyin Miata, and today on our video we're going to be talking about track day prep. Our summer camp is coming up this weekend. We're going to have hundreds of Miata owners here in our shop, and one of the things we're doing is we're going to Grand Junction Motor Speedway for a track day. We've done this in the past, we haven't been able to for a few years, and we've got it back this year, so we're looking forward to it. And we figured now is a good time just to remind everybody, you're signed up for a track day, especially if you're first track day, what do you need to do to get ready for it? And so we have a number of cars here, some of which are ready for track days, some of which are not. And I'm going to talk about what you need to do, what you need to look at, and what you need to watch for when you're getting ready. So there's three basic parts I'm going to cover. The first one is safety. The second one is mechanical preparation. And the third one is human preparation, which is often overlooked. So we're going to try to cover all of those and then go over some of the things that that you want to do during the day, things you want to pay attention to. And as always, if you're watching this live right now, feel free to put comments or questions in the comments. It's always good to have feedback from people. It's always good to be able to address anything you might want to know. If you're watching this in the future, put the questions in the comments and we'll address them in the comments. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is safety. Because, well, for obvious reasons. Nobody likes seeing someone get hurt at a track day. There's a lot of paperwork, insurance, and also it's no fun getting hurt. So the most obvious thing is you will need a helmet. The type of helmet you need is going to depend on the organization that you're running with. Every organization has slightly different rules and regulations. So that brings me to the first point is if you have any questions about what you should be doing for safety, talk to the event organizers. They will tell you what sort of helmets are legitimate or allowed in that particular event. All helmets are rated by different ratings by regulatory agencies. They're also rated to different year ratings. So this is an SA 2020, I think. So this meets the regulations of that era. They're usually updated, I believe it's every 5 years. But the most important thing is make sure that whatever helmet you're going to bring meets whatever those regulations are. They might be quite low if you're going on autocross or you're going at a low-speed track day, say taking place at a go-kart track. But if you're doing a major event at a major track, you may need something fairly current. When you're looking into those, into the safety for your own person, of course, look in to see if there's anything else that you might need. Do you need to wear long pants? Do you need to wear long-sleeve shirt? You will definitely need closed-toed shoes. Flip-flops, while they may be cool, not allowed on the racetrack anywhere. So that's an important one. And don't forget that these safety requirements are a minimum. You can happily go beyond that. If you want to wear a full-on race suit, fireproof race suit with a Hans device and your latest helmet, and you happen to have a halo seat in your car, et cetera, no one's going to tell you not to go to a track day with that. So if they say that you need to have an SA20 helmet and you need to wear long pants, that's the minimum. Feel free to go above and beyond. It's like riding a motorcycle. All the gear, all the time is the best way to go because you want to make sure that you are protected in case something happens. So the other big thing for Miata owners is because they're all convertibles is roll protection. And this is something that does vary from event to event and from organization to organization, so you do definitely want to talk to the organizers. So over here we've got a couple of cars. This is a stock NB. And as you can see, no roll protection. This one, nothing's been done to it. This would be legal at an autocross. This would be legal at our summer camp track day because it takes place on a kart track and so the speeds are very low. It's effectively an autocross. So in that case, it would be all right. If you want to go to an event like Miata Reunion, this would not work. This is not okay. You would have to have some sort of roll protection. This is pretty common for convertibles in general, but especially Miatas. This NC has the factory roll protection in it. It's not much roll protection really. If you look underneath here, there's a couple of very skinny little tubes inside. Some organizations may accept this when they won't accept that. And again, go to the organization. Miata Reunion, I believe, will allow this setup in the novice classes, where speeds are controlled, where you always have an instructor. Basically, where the risk is lower, is controlled more, they will accept this, but not in the higher classes. If you want to make sure, we'll look at something like these. These are proper roll bars. They not only are made of drawn over mandrel DOM roll bar steel, but they're also anchored in multiple places. They have these rear braces going backwards. The diagonals may or may not be required, but No one's ever going to tell you that it's too much roll bar. The nice thing about Miatas is there's so many of them going to track days that the tech inspectors know the major brands. So if you roll up with a roll bar from Hard Dog or from Blackbird Fabrication or from Auto Power, one of those guys, you will almost definitely be in compliance with whatever the rules are for the event you're going to. If you're going for competition, there may be much more stringent rules, but we're talking about track days, especially in the novice level, these sort of bars were usually very acceptable. You do want to make sure that they are high enough to clear the top of your head, because there's no point in having a roll bar if your head becomes the supporting element. So that is something to keep in mind, especially if you have a tall upper body or a tall total body. You may have to do something like do a foamectomy on the seat to get you a little bit lower. We did a video on how to do a foamectomy on these very seats a while back. So we have to do some tricks to make sure you're low enough and make sure you pick a roll bar that is tall enough, because some of them, as they go further back, they can get pretty low. So this is the biggest thing for Miata owners if you want to go on the track, is to have a roll bar. Do we have any questions yet, Mike? Okay, so mechanical. I've seen a lot of people say, I can't go to the track because I need to, and then they mention some sort of modification they need to do. I need to put on sway bars. I need to put my new suspension on. I need big brakes, whatever it is. Back in 1990, when the Miata was introduced, there was an SCCA event called, SCCA class called showroom stock, and it was literally showroom stock. You weren't even allowed to repaint the colors of the car to non-factory colors. So, I mean, a Miata right off the showroom floor is mechanically capable of handling track use. Now, your Miata might have been made in 1990, in which case it was ready for track use back in 1990. Today, it's had 34 years of experience. It's a little more tired. So you do want to check it over to make sure everything's good. So we're going to start with the actual tech part, and then we'll start talking about the modifications. And again, feel free to throw in any questions in the comments if you've got any. So usually, a tech inspection, and again, this is something you can check with the organizers, but it covers things like no leaks, no major leaks at least, but no leaks really. The battery is well secured, because that's a big, heavy chunk of literally lead. You don't want that flying around. No loose items in the cabin or the trunk, and the reason for that is partly for distraction. It's unlikely you're going to cause an accident by having something rolling around your trunk, but you're going to be distracted when you hear that slamming around in there, and it will also make some damage to your bodywork. We have a Miata here that once went out on track with an aluminum overflow tank sitting loose in the trunk, and it's got damage all over the rear quarter because of it. Uncool. So you don't want anything loose in the cabin or in the trunk. Make sure that's all cleaned out. You want to make sure your floor mats are removed, because there's no chance of it sliding up underneath the pedal and getting yourself stuck and having an exciting moment. Obviously easy to do. And usually there's an overall, like, no general safety issues. A tech inspector will give themselves some leeway to say, no, that's not okay. I once saw a Honda CRX go through tech with a set of race harnesses that were duct taped to the back of the seat. That was the mounting. So that's the sort of thing that follows under no general safety issues. No one's going to write a regulation that says you cannot duct tape your harnesses to the back of your seat, but anyway. One other one that I like to mention is if you're going to run a camera, a mounted camera, it should probably have a leash on it as well, just in case it comes off its mount. So one, you don't lose your footage, and two, you don't have a camera ricocheting around somewhere or launching off your car and hitting the car behind you. So if possible, run a leash from your camera to your roll bar or whatever it is you have it attached to. If you do have a passenger who's shooting handheld cameras, that can be pretty distracting. It's not great footage. I don't really recommend it. It's popular because you just pull your phone out, but having somebody trying to hold a phone out at arm's length when you're going around over the corkscrew and they punch you in the side of the head, overrated. So, the actual technical side of things. What should you do? What sort of upgrades do you want to do? What do you want to do to make sure your car is hardened for the track? And this really comes down to brakes and cooling. Those are the two big ones. Your brakes are going to see much harder use than they see on the street. They're going to see a lot of heat. The amount of abuse the brakes take depends on the track and depends on your horsepower level. Some tracks are much easier on brakes than others. Novices in general tend to be hard on their brakes because, I mean, it's easy to go fast in a straight line. So you want to make sure that you have pads that are up to the job. They don't need to be full-on race pads. Depending on the track, you might be able to get away with an aggressive street pad, something like an RS4, maybe an HP Plus, although those are questionable. Most brake manufacturers have something that falls in that category. We use the Porterfield RS4 for a lot of our cars. It works well for light track use. Running a turbo car on a tight course can be a little hard on them. On a more open course, they do just fine. But you do want to have pads that are up to the task. Street pads may very likely overheat, and that's obviously going to be a problem. Overheated pads don't work very well. We've talked about that in some of our videos in the past. And the other thing is your brake fluid should be fresh. I did an entire video on brake fluid recently. Basically, it absorbs moisture from the air over time, and the water that is now inside the brake fluid can boil. And that means all of a sudden your brake pedal goes to the floor, and you have a very upsetting moment because you're probably happening right when you need the brakes the most. So you'll definitely want to flush out your brake fluid for fresh fluid, ideally a DOT4. You don't need to put something crazy like a Motul 660 in there, some really exotic high-end brake fluid. Just fresh DOT4 should be just fine. Okay, so, and the other thing is about the brake pads, make sure they have lots of meat on them. A low brake pad that's near the end of its life will wear much faster than a fresh brake pad because it doesn't have as much thermal mass. So if you're halfway through your brake pads, they're not going to last as long as the first half did. So make sure you've got lots of meat on your brake pads. Luckily, it's fairly easy to change pads out, so that should be part of your prep. The other one is tires. Now, you can take to spinning tire on track. You don't need a super sticky tire. In fact, a lot of people recommend you don't run a super sticky tire as a novice because it can give you bad habits of basically leaning on the tire more than learning how to drive. But the problem is if you get something that's too pedestrian, they can chunk. They're not able to deal with the heat. I'm not even sure what these are. Falcon somethings. They're not able to deal with the heat the same way. And so what can happen is as they squirm around, they overheat, especially on the edges, and chunks of them start coming off. So you can actually destroy a set of brand new, 800 tread wear all seasons quite easily on the track because they're just not built for the heat. So it's worth having a set of good performance tires on there. So any summer performance tire should do the job. You don't need to have a 200 tread wear. We've run 300 tread wear cars on the street, like these ones here, or on the track. These are a set of Yokohama Adven Flava Flaves, or whatever they're called. And these will work on the track. You're not going to want to beat on them too much, but they'll work well enough. They'll survive the day. So you don't need to have super exotic R compound tires or R888Rs like we have on this thing. You'll have a lot of fun with those, but you can get away with basically a decent performance tire. Questions yet, Mike? Okay. And the last thing about your wheels and tires you want to do is you want to take off the center caps. These caps are almost always made of plastic. They will get hot, they will come off, and you will never see them again. So these little guys here, make sure you pop those off before you go on the track. Even if you have the original daisies on the Miata, you want to pull those off. They look cooler anyway, but definitely pop that off there. Okay, so that's basically it for prepping the car. It's got to be healthy. Coolant should be fairly fresh. If your radiator is bright green because it's 35 years old, that's probably a good time to take advantage of changing that out, but mostly it's just brakes and tires. And again, I'm talking about a novice going to their first track day. I'm not talking about an experienced track day driver who's going to win an event at Laguna Seca or something like that. You experienced folks probably already know a fair bit about this, so we're looking more to the first timers. So, person prep, and this is, like I said, it's important. It gets overlooked a lot. You want to, if you can, get an idea of where the track goes from watching some videos, playing a simulator. I mean, it's a good excuse to sit down and play video games, isn't it? But it's always good to have at least a mental picture of where the track goes in your head, even if you're just reading a track map. It's not critical, but it helps. You've got a lot, especially your first time on the track, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of pressure, and having that comfort about knowing when you go over the hill, the next corner is a left instead of a right, that's important to know. Apparently that's your left and your right, not mine. But I strongly recommend trying to get all your prep done early. For some reason, it's viewed as a badge of honor to be wrenching on your car on the trailer at 3 o'clock in the morning before a track event, but it's really a terrible idea. People who win races don't do that because you show up to the track with a car that's not necessarily fully prepped and you show up tired. And that's the important thing. You want to make sure you're rested when you show up. A track day is demanding mentally, demanding physically, and you don't want to show up with an empty tank. So do the work, get it done the weekend before, get it done the middle of the week before. Try not to be running around the night before the track day to get everything done at once. You've known it was coming. It's only you're the one who gets to choose to do this. So choose not to. You also want to make sure you bring some stuff too, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the big thing is basically don't show up stressed, don't show up tired, and just show up ready to learn, because that's what you're there to do. Some of the stuff you'll want to bring with you. You'll want to bring a tire pressure gauge, because you might want to adjust tire pressures or check tire pressures. You might want to bring some spare oil and water for the car if it does consume some of those. I would recommend bringing food, because track food almost always sucks, and it's almost always very slow to get your hands on. So bring a packed lunch. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I mean, it's the fuel of any good track day racer. Bring sunscreen, bring a hat, bring lots of drinking water, because again, you're going to be working in a hot car, even if it's not hot at the event. You're working hard. Make sure you stay hydrated, because that helps keep you fresh for the whole day. And depending on the track, you might want to bring some fuel. It's usually at most tracks. It's usually not cheap at most tracks. So it's good to have a 5-gallon can around if you have some way to carry it out there. Anything else, Mike? No questions? Okay, so on the day, here's some of the things you'll want to do when you're there. Here, I'll walk around a little bit so those who don't necessarily have an NA or ND can see some alternate scenery. The most important thing on the day is to pay attention to the car. Show some mechanical sympathy. This is your car. Don't beat it up. There's no pride in breaking your car to track day. There's only shame in breaking your car to track day, because now you have to find a way to get your car home. If your car starts to smell different, if it starts to feel different, then you should check it out. Don't be afraid to cut a session short, because something is changing. That usually means something is suffering. For example, if you start smelling brakes, that means your pads are overheating. You might discover in the next corner you don't have any brakes. Not good. So if you do notice something changing, do something in response. If it starts running hot, keep an eye on the water gauge. If it starts running hotter, you can just simply start shifting sooner. Shift at 6 instead of 7,000 RPM. That'll help bring the load down a little bit. You won't be as fast on the straights, but the corners are the fun part anyway, and that'll help bring the temperature down. But just be sensitive to the car, because that makes life so much easier when it doesn't break. Also, pay attention to the driver. You are most likely to have a problem on the last session of the day. When you're tired, you've got just that one last one you want to get out there. You want to finally nail that one corner and take it as fast as you possibly can. When you're at your weakest, that's when you have a problem. So make sure you take care of yourself, that you drink water, you stay out of the sun if you can, you stay cool, and be willing to say, you know what, I've had enough, I'm going to walk away. There's no shame in saying, I've had a very long, very hard day. I don't need to take that last session, because that's when you make the foolish mistake, and you end up there was a fellow at one of the Miatas at Luna Seca event in the 90s, put his rental Miata into the wall, or put his Miata into the wall right near the end of the event, and had to go all the way. I think he had to get it towed all the way back across the country or something like this. You don't want to be that guy. It's not a good part of the day. And my recommendation is, if you are a new driver, if you're new to track days, don't mess with the car. It's always fun if you've got a car that's heavily modified and has loads of adjustments on it, to spend a bunch of time tweaking tire pressures, tweaking the sway bar settings, tweaking the shock settings, trying to make the car faster. Trust me, if you're new on the track, the car is not the weak link here. You should keep the car consistent so you have a nice, familiar, stable platform, and then you learn how to drive it better. Unless it's got some gross problem that's going on. The back end is leaving the ground, coming off corners or something. Generally speaking, though, my recommendation is don't mess with the car. When I started off autocrossing back in the, I didn't touch the car for something like 3 years. I just left it alone and learned as much as I could about how to catch that one guy who had a similar car in front of me. And then I started working on messing around with it. So, seems a strange thing to hear from a performance shop, but you are the weakest link. So fix that first. So some of the questions we had coming in here, one of them is, should you get an instructor if you can? And that's a great idea, because instructors, that's what they do. That's what they're there for, is to help get you onto the track, get you driving well, teach you about how the weight transfer works, what the lines are like. You might spot any bad habits you have, because they're much easier to stop in the beginning than they are to fix later. So definitely, if you have access to an instructor, I strongly recommend you get someone to ride with you or show you around, or basically give you an idea of what's up, because it's the fastest way to learn. Another question we had is, when do you need extended lower ball joints? And the answer for that is when you can't reach your target camber, whichever. We did a couple of videos on extended ball joints. They're definitely not required just to go on the track. They're required if you have a specific setup you're trying to reach, and you can't reach it with the stock suspension parts, but really it's got nothing to do with track day stuff. It's just a matter of that setup. So when do you need extended ball joints? When you need extended ball joints. So do we have any more questions? Any questions at all? I covered it all. Look at that, one try. So don't forget, we have our summer camp this weekend. We are going to be live streaming a bunch of product rundowns, some new product announcements, including one fairly exciting one. We're going to be doing some technical seminars. We're going to be doing some live streams from the track, from inside our shop here. We're going to be trying to bring everybody who's outside, inside if you couldn't make it. So we hope you join us for that. There'll be events going on all day Friday and Saturday on our Facebook page. So definitely check that one out. In the meantime, if you like this kind of stuff, you know, the usual social media stuff, like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends, put up posters, whatever. We appreciate it. And we'll hopefully see some of you this weekend. The rest of you we'll see online. My name's Keith Tanner. Thanks for your attention.